Perimenopause are the years before menopause. They can last anywhere from a couple of months to 14 plus years. And it's generally about a decade before we go into menopause. That is known as the transition phase. And there's actually 3 phases of perimenopause.
Our next guest, Andrea Donsky, is known as the menopause educator and researcher. Andrea is an entrepreneur with nearly 25 years of experience in the health and wellness space. She is a soon-to-be published researcher, and she hosts the popular podcast Menopause Reimagined, and has appeared on television across North America as a menopause expert. Her latest venture is Morphus.com that supports women taking control of their symptoms and health with nutrition, lifestyle, research, and science-backed supplements.
So it is a massive issue for women who are having sleep issues in this phase of life. I wanted to understand, okay, so let's dig deeper into why we're not sleeping, specifically in perimenopause and menopause. And what we found out is that
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better. Well, actually, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms.
Hi, and welcome to the next episode of the Live Beyond the Norms Health and Longevity podcast. Our next guest, Andrea Donsky, is known as the menopause educator and researcher to her 340,000 plus followers on TikTok. Actually, since I initially wrote this, the number has grown. She is nearly at 350,000 followers on TikTok. Andrea is an entrepreneur with nearly 25 years of experience in the health and wellness space. She is a soon-to-be published researcher, and she hosts the popular podcast Menopause Reimagined, and has appeared on television across North America as a menopause expert. Her latest venture is Morphus.com that supports women taking control of their symptoms and health with nutrition, lifestyle, research, and science-backed supplements. Simon & Schuster will be publishing her book in the spring of 2026. I'm so excited to talk with her. Andrea, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
All right, so I like to do a little bit of background. I sent you a bunch of questions. The first 2 questions are a little bit more background, so they're a little surprise. Although you initially started studying commerce, you quickly switched from helping market jams, jellies, and ice cream accessories, which I'm not exactly sure what those are, for Smuckers, to going back to school to study holistic nutrition and have never looked back. Can you talk about that transition in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, marketing was my love, business was my love. And then I guess in my late 20s, I started having mid to late 20s, I started having a lot of stomach issues, digestive issues, and I didn't know what was causing them. And I would eat something and I would get gas and bloating. And being in your mid 20s, you're like, this shouldn't be happening. So I started doing a lot of research around digestion and what happens to our digestive system when we eat certain foods. And then I started just becoming really interested in it. And I thought, hey, I'm becoming an expert in nutrition. I'm like, I should go back to school and become a nutritionist. And that's when I thought, okay, I'm going to do that. So I went back to school in my late 20s. I think I was 29 at the time, to go back to school to learn about nutrition. And yeah, I never looked back after that.
That's so. You unleashed this nutrition and health beast that is Andrea Donsky. And like you said, you didn't hold back. In fact, you started off, you published The Healthy Shopper. I want to hear a little bit about that. You wrote a book, Unjunk Your Junk Food. You were involved in a podcast titled Health Power. Can you talk about what parts of your youth, like where you grew up, how you grew up, your parents, that probably had an impact on you landing squarely both in the health space and also in the education about health space?
Well, I mean, my grandmother was definitely ahead of her time. I mean, she was very much about having salads every night for dinner. My grandmother cooked with healthier oils. And then that, obviously, my mom followed suit. And so our household growing up, my mom was very much about having those healthy dinners, sitting down together as a family, having conversation, having salads before we started, making sure we were getting enough protein, cooking from scratch. My mom was a stay-at-home mom when we were growing up. So those values were something that she brought us up with. And my mom, my dad, on the other hand, I love talking about this because my dad loved junk food and still loves junk food. So my mom and my dad would, often go head to head on that, and he would sneak the junk food in his car. So he would drive me to school, and underneath his front passenger seat, there would be like popcorn and chips and like licorice. And I remember thinking, like, my dad, it's like kind of funny but not funny that my mom didn't want him to have the junk food in the house, but yet he would like keep it in his car and he would hide it. But then we would always find it, and then we would like obviously eat it because we were kids. So I always came from the frame of mind of like, okay, I'm not going to do this to my kids when I have them. But fast forward, when I had my son, this was back in 2003, and I saw what certain additives do to my kids. And I started with my son, and then I had my daughter 20 months later. I literally became like my mom, and I'm like, no. I don't want you to have all this junk food, and, be mindful of what you're putting in your body. I was that mom that was bringing red peppers to birthday parties when my kids were like 1 and 2. And it didn't work out very well because obviously my kids caught on and they wanted the cake, right? So that's when I kind of shifted and thought, I understand that the road I'm going down is I want to make better choices for my kids, but at the same time, I didn't want to not so much deprive them, but I understood that kids are going to be kids and they're going to want to have certain things, but how can we make healthier choices for them? So that's what really led me to write my book, Unjunk Your Junk Food. This was back in 2010 when I pitched the idea to Simon & Schuster. And I thought, well, how can we still have our junk food, yet make healthier choices? And what was bothering me a lot at the time was the food coloring, because we knew that when my kids would ingest food coloring, it literally would make them have the crazies, we called it, within 10 minutes. I mean, my kids were bouncing off the walls. So I thought, well, how can we have our junk food without the food coloring, without the artificial sweeteners, without the MSG and the flavored chips, without all of these additives that we know could cause harm to our bodies, especially our kids, right? Our kids are more susceptible to these, and it influences them differently. So that's what just led me down the path. In addition to me not feeling good and going back to school to become a nutritionist, it just kind of became this perfect scenario of me going, okay, I think I'm going to go into the health field. And really, that's what I've been doing. And it'll be 25 years in a couple of months.
That's amazing. Yeah. And you're going to go into the field and you're going to write books and you're going to do podcasts and you're going to now soon to be published research.
Actually published as of when I sent you that, I wasn't yet. I am now published as of this past weekend. So awesome. I'm now 4 times over published menopause researcher.
Congratulations. Actually, I'm going to put a note. I want to ask about that. You mentioned healthy oils already, right? Kind of growing up with healthy oils. We had a short conversation before we got started where you were kind of going back and forth with some people about seed oils. Now I know why like that resonates with you so strongly, because you're like, that's a foundational thing. And you and I are definitely on the same page. My dad was similar, I think, to your dad. I don't think he hid food, although I rarely ended up in the car with him on his commute. But I remember when my dad went on a diet, both my brother and I are like, yes, because when he would go on a diet and start exercising, because he was depriving himself so much, he would bring home Intamin's coffee cake. So it was a weird thing that whenever he was on a diet, we were getting more sweets. So I understand this kind of dichotomy between where your mom and dad were. All right, so you co-authored the Unjunk Your Junk Food. Are there a couple of things from that book that you would share, right? Because I've got 14-year-old twins. I'm constantly I do enjoy. I remember going to the store and that being a special occasion, and I could get a soda when I got to the store. I want my kids to have that same experience. Take your bike, go to the store, but I also don't want you bringing so much that you're storing it in your bedroom or in the TV room. And what additional guidance might you be able to provide from the Unjunk Your Junk Food?
Yeah, so Unjunk Your Junk Food was really at a time when and there wasn't much out there about reading labels. So again, this was, I pitched it in 2010. It launched in, I think it was January of 2011. And I wanted people to understand what they're eating by understanding how to read a product label, like how to read an ingredient label. And coming as I'm a Gen Xer, and our whole generation was about calories, being mindful of how many calories. But where I found, for me, what opened up my eyes was it's not so much about the calories. It's about what are the ingredients in the food that you're eating. And we found that at the time, this was before the GMO movement. This was before the seed oil movement. I mean, yeah, like, I mean, not even so much before it. Kate Shanahan wrote her first book in 2009 about seed oils, but I didn't even know her at the time. So we didn't have those in our book. But what we did have were things like high fructose corn syrup that we know are the step before type 2 diabetes, or it can lead to heart disease or insulin resistance. Like, we know that that's what it can lead to. We know that MSG, or monosodium glutamate, can cause heart palpitations or excessive sweating. Now, some people will say MSG is totally fine. Others will say it's not. Again, it comes down to our personal body. How do these additives affect us? Artificial sweeteners, another really controversial ingredient. But in my mind, I'm like, if there's so much controversy about whether or not artificial ingredients like aspartame are good or not good for us, or healthy or not healthy for us, I'm like, well, why don't we err on the side of caution and say, okay, maybe that's something we need to be mindful of and not have artificial sweeteners. Instead, replace it with things like monk fruit or stevia or other things like that we know that don't have the same negative effect. Everything in moderation as well, Chris. Like, I really come from the point of view of everything in moderation and balance. But when there is that question, I'm like, let's just try the healthier option if there is one available. Same thing with artificial flavors, artificial colors, certain preservatives, and the list goes on.
What do you think of allulose? Since this is,
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been playing around with it. A resistant starch that also has lower calories. That's pretty amazing. A lot of people don't get to have conversations with influencers who have 350,000 followers. So I got a couple questions. When you're out and about, just meeting everyday people, do you share with them at all that you're an influencer, or do you focus on the nutrition? Have you been recognized? Talk about, have you had any kind of cool experiences with so many followers?
So, it's very interesting. So I started TikTok in 2021, and I've been on social media a really long time. So like I said, it's going to be 25 years that I'm in the health and wellness space. And before the word influencer existed, it was like we called ourselves ambassadors. Like, I'm an ambassador for different brands or for the health and wellness space. So when the word influencer came to be, it was kind of a bit of like a chuckle, because that's what I've been doing for so long. There's now just an actual name for it. So for me, it's, when I started TikTok, I wanted to be able to come from a place of a very niche market. Now, I didn't realize at the time that there were so many women in particular, because I focus on perimenopause and menopause, that were over the age of 40. And I have found my community on TikTok, and I grew really quickly, which has been incredible. Like you said, almost 350,000 women. But I come from a very specific place of education. So I was very intentional. I'm very intentional with what I post. I only post generally around women's health, women in perimenopause and menopause, messages of empowerment as much as I can. I just did a post recently about compliments. It went viral, and I didn't even realize. I'm like, it was so nice to see about women complimenting women. So for me, I found my niche on TikTok. I love TikTok in particular because I find it has a really amazing community there. But no, I don't go around telling people that I'm an influencer. And my kids are proud of me. Of course, my kids are proud of me. And it has definitely opened up doors for me in terms of being able to communicate my message. Because for me, when I went into perimenopause, I didn't know I was in perimenopause. So I was in it for a total of 14 years, 11 of which I had no idea. And I want to change the narrative around menopause, because it still, unfortunately, has a bit of a stigma depending on where you are and where you're listening to this. Certain countries have different ways of looking at it. It's nice to see in North America that it is starting to lessen that stigma, but it does still exist. And the fact that 20% of women don't know what stage they're in, and that's according to our research, we have so much work to do around educating women about this stage of life so they don't have to suffer, so they don't have to be taken by surprise. So to me, the work that I'm doing really stems from my passion around education and creating awareness for women in this phase of life, because I don't want my daughters, I don't want women who are coming after us, Gen Xers, and even Gen Xers who still maybe don't realize that they're in perimenopause or still are just coming into it. We don't want them to go through what we went through. So we are screaming it from the rooftops. We are not going into perimenopause and menopause quietly, because we want to make a difference for all women who come after us.
And I don't know if I shared with you, so my wife is from Panama. She has a similar following. Your following is bigger, but she speaks about menopause in Spanish. And so I applaud you,
Amazing.
because I know she had a tough time. She went through early menopause, and like I think that caught her totally off guard, and that's part
Yeah.
of why she has so much passion, and clearly you also have so much passion about doing that. If anybody wants to pick up some Spanish versions, her link is Mujeres Vivaces, which means like vivacious women, and so
Amazing.
it's pretty cool. And I ask, because she'll often tell people that she's an influencer, and then the response, you should try this. This response from people is like, oh yeah, you're an influencer, yeah, everybody's an influencer, and then you show them the numbers, and then they're like, oh, like their jaw drops. They're like, oh, you're actually an influencer, which is kind of a cool experience.
That's awesome. Good for her. I love that.
So you have you're close to 350,000 followers. One of the things this does is give you instant feedback, and you actually talked about one about compliments. Like, that's just kind of amazing. How popular it gets really is how it resonates with the people that are seeing them. Are there any? Is there anything you can share? Maybe the most impactful symptom or the least talked about symptom that you can share based on your audience's responses and comments to the video? Like, you're like, oh, this is a lot bigger, or maybe smaller than I thought it would be.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say there's two symptoms that generally take women by surprise. Like they do well because it's one of those things that women are like, oh, I didn't realize that was a menopause symptom. So I'd say the first one is itchy ears. That's something that women don't necessarily make the connection to. And that has to do with estrogen falling and drying out our mucous membranes, including the mucous membranes in our ears. And then the other one would be phantom smell. So phantom smell is the reason I'm so passionate about it is, well, I have itchy ears too, or had it, but there is a solution. But phantom smells, what's great about, what's interesting about that is that that was one of my first symptoms, but I didn't realize it was connected to perimenopause and menopause. I had several tests done. I went to several doctors. And then once I got that clean bill of health, I was like, what could it possibly be? And I only put two and two together a couple of years ago when I started doing all the research that I'm doing. So it is a very common symptom of perimenopause and menopause. It generally goes away on its own, but phantom smells are when you smell things that other people don't. And the three most common are smoke, any type of smoke. It could be cigarettes, cigars, campfire, doesn't matter. Number two is mildew, and number three is body odor. So those are the top three. They're generally not the best smells. Like, for example, sulfur, cheap plastics, overheated electronics are common as well. Poop, cat pee, but there are some that are nice, like chrysanthemums or chicken soup or blueberry muffins or chocolate chip cookies. And I'm like, why couldn't I have those? But so there are different ones that aren't as bad. And we have a whole survey on that as well that I'm going to look to get published next year.
Oh, very cool. So it sounds very much like at least my wife's response to hot flashes, where she would regularly ask me, did it just get warm in here? Right. And that's no. And then this would also be, do you smell this? And that would also be another no. Is it a do different things trigger like strong reactions to smell, or these are just flat out, it's not a sensitivity, a hypersensitivity. It's flat out, it's not there and you're smelling it.
Correct. It's not a hypersensitive. No, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And then itchy ears is actually inside the canal, I'm assuming, right? Yeah. Because of the mucus lining. That's very good. And you said Aegeers. I'm not familiar with that. Tell me a little bit about that.
It has to do with lower estrogen, and estrogen keeps things moist and plump. And as estrogen falls, it dries out our skin, including the mucous membrane. So it has a lot to do with that. Now, there could be a lot of different reasons for any of the symptoms we're talking about. So I'm from the school of thought, or the train of thought, that you have to go to your doctor and get everything ruled out, because you can't just blame it on menopause, because it could be you could have other underlying things that are going on that you need to rule out and get that clean bill of health. Once you get that clean bill of health and you're like, what else could it be? Well, it could possibly be a perimenopause or menopause symptom. And our research shows that there's 103 different symptoms. So, it's the old way of thinking was that there's 34 recognized symptoms or 85. No. There's 103. We are now published in a medical journal. We are the first of its kind published in a medical journal to quantify the number of symptoms that exist. So if you see 34 anywhere, you're like, that's old information. It is 103 plus symptoms.
Is there, so I think I saw a post where you had just added another symptom, and maybe that was the 103rd. What is the latest symptom that we should all be excited about?
Yeah, well, the newest one you're talking about is sleep apnea, and we added it because it's a very common symptom. It's a lot of women will have it when they go into menopause, but unfortunately, a lot of doctors won't check for it because it's more common in men, but it is very common in women too, especially as we go into menopause. And the reason I became pretty passionate about it is because my mom had sleep apnea. She didn't know about it. I had been begging her to go for a test for a long time. She finally went and found out she had severe sleep apnea. Now, not taking care of sleep apnea can lead to so many different issues, including heart issues. So it's a really critical thing that we need to get checked for on a regular basis by doing a sleep test. There's wearables that you can do now. They're not 100%, but they can possibly provide you with some indication that you want to speak to your doctor about. So take care of your sleep apnea. And she also had high blood pressure. Since she's been sleeping with her CPAP machine, her blood pressure is decreased. She's feeling so much better. She's getting more sleep. She's not exhausted all the time. So it's made a huge impact on her quality of life.
Have you read the book Why We Sleep by Dr. Matthew Walker?
I haven't, no.
It is an amazing,
Okay, I'm gonna check it
amazing
out.
book. He started off in Alzheimer's research, realized that a lot of Alzheimer's, if not all, have sleep challenges, ended up studying sleep for 25 years. And it's his kind of dissertation on the 25 years of research.
Amazing.
And I call it the Freddy Krueger of sleep books. You know, Freddy Krueger from Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, yeah.
That's our generation, right? He scared you out of dreams.
Yeah.
This book will actually scare you into dreams.
Into
He
dreams.
literally says in the beginning of the book, if you were to fall asleep while reading this, I would take that as a compliment because the physiological negative things that happen to us physiologically, not just, okay, we know it, okay, we're groggy and maybe we can't process stuff as well, but the things that happen to us physiologically when we don't get sleep are so bad. And then he also kind of points out that the prescription sleep aids are something you should stay away from because they may make you feel refreshed, like they suppress the desire for sleep. So you wake up not desiring sleep, but you haven't had the REM and NREM sleep that you really need to heal and restore your body. So I love that book. And it's funny because my next question is, I noticed that sleep videos were pretty popular. There's some of the high topics. I don't know if you've noticed that. I was kind of looking at what were the view counts and the like counts. And what is the impact? We talked a little bit about it. What is the impact of menopause on sleep?
So it's huge. So according to our research, which was our foundational research survey that we published, that we put out in 2022, which is one of the 4 that is published in the journal Menopause as of December 2024, we found out that there are the top 10 symptoms for menopause. And number 1 is fatigue. Number 2 is brain fog. Number 3 is sleep. So it is a massive issue for women who are having sleep issues in this phase of life. So I wanted to understand, okay, so let's dig deeper into why we're not sleeping, specifically in perimenopause and menopause. And what we found out is that the number 1 reason is because of stress, and the number 2 reason is bathroom visits. Number 3 reason is night sweats. So those are the top 3. So how do we help that? So number 1, we've got to manage our stress. So we have another survey that was published, which is our anxiety and mental health survey. And we know that women are more stressed now in perimenopause and menopause than they were before. We're also less capable of dealing with it. Like we can't cope with it as well. So it's really important that we have some type of stress management tool in our daily lives, and specifically before going to bed, to help us sleep better, so that we help with our heart rate variability, which is our ability to recover from stress, but also the importance of sleep. I always say, like, I try to think of it, or the way I explain it is, think of it as like 2 stars at the top of a Christmas tree. We've got our foundation for sleep, which is key, and the foundation for digestive health. And I'm talking specifically perimenopause and menopause, but sleep is so crucial because when we're not sleeping, it leads to a cascade of other issues, including wanting to eat more junk food. We're reaching for things like caffeine and ultra processed sugar to keep us awake. It affects our insulin levels. It affects so many, our fatigue, which is that number 1 symptom, and I can go on and on and on. So it's really important that we get that good night's sleep, and especially the deep sleep, because the deep sleep is when our body repairs itself. It's when our brain cleanses itself through the lymphatic system. So that's important because we want to make sure that our body is doing what it needs to do to repair, but also it helps you wake up feeling more refreshed. So as we age in general, we get less deep sleep. So what are some things I call myself a menopause sleep hacker, because I'm always trying to figure out how do we get more deep sleep as we go into perimenopause. And one of the ways is to make sure that we are doing whatever we can to set ourselves up for sleep success, especially around managing our stress levels. Because when we're waking up between 2 and 4 a.m., which the majority of the women who answered our survey said is happening to them, is it could be one of the main reasons could be that cortisol is spiking at the wrong time. And that's where my brain goes to, right? But it could be other reasons too. Maybe digestion isn't working optimally, or maybe that you're not, digesting your food properly. It could be blood sugar. It could be different things. But my sense was, it's going to be cortisol that's rising, which is stress. And we confirmed that through our anxiety survey that 67% of the women waking up between 2 and 4 a.m. was due to the fact that they were stressed. So we have to manage those stress levels. It's key.
Yeah, and the weird thing, the crazy thing, right, about stress, and then not being able to handle emotions as well, and how they tie into sleep, right? You go to sleep and you're ruminating about whatever kind of emotional mistakes you made, and now you're not getting as much sleep. And in the middle of the pandemic, with a good friend of mine, Dr. Patrick Wanis, we did a PR tour, just like we're like, just get us on a bunch of shows. We're going to try and help people sleep better. He's going to help manage the emotions. I'm going to give like the practical tips. And I call it the horrible emotional sleep spiral, right? Where you're not getting good sleep and then you're not managing your emotions. And we don't have, like, your cell phone at least has little bars to tell you how much juice it has left and how much signal.
Exactly.
We don't have bars that tell us how apt we're going to be at handling our emotions today. So you just go full into these situations where you probably maybe shouldn't. And then it creates that spiral. I can't, and you said the top 3 symptoms. One was stress. I forget what the other one is. The third one was sleep. And those are all so interrelated already. If you could just fix sleep, you're probably going to have a dramatic impact on the rest.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Yeah. Whoever's listening, focus on sleep as much as you can. Have really good sleep hygiene. Read the book Why We Sleep by Dr. Matthew Walker. He talks about all the things that you can do. And you talked about night sweats. So having your room cold enough has to have a positive impact on that. I'm not saying you get rid of them, but at least have a positive impact on that, for sure. So you've got perimenopause, right? So that's when you're in this transition, and then you've got postmenopause. Talk about the difference in symptoms between those, and is there a transition, and what does that look like? Because some people don't know they're in perimenopause yet, and they're squarely in the middle of it, and are listening to this and going, okay, that's me. What's on the other side? What's on when you're postmenopausal or actually menopausal?
Sure. So I can give you some definitions. So perimenopause are the years before menopause. They can last anywhere from a couple of months to 14 plus years. I had a woman tell me she was in perimenopause for 20 years. On average, though, we're in it for about 4 to 6 years. And it's generally about a decade before we go into menopause. So that is known as the transition phase. And there's actually 3 phases of perimenopause. Menopause is once you've got into, I say there's 3 phases. Technically there's 2, but I believe there's 3. And then menopause is once you go a year or 365 days without a cycle. This would be natural menopause. This is when your ovaries are now taking their much needed break and you no longer have a cycle. Your hormones like estrogen and progesterone and testosterone are now in the menopausal ranges. Your LH and your FSH are going up, and you have now entered that year mark where you're like, I'm in menopause. Menopause is actually technically just 1 day if you actually look at the definition. Everything after that is considered to be postmenopause. But here's why this is important to understand. I am redefining that because I want to get rid of the word postmenopause. I feel like it's misleading, and I feel like it throws people off their game. And here's why. In all the years that I've been doing this, it's probably about 7 years now that I've been really focused or hyper-focused on perimenopause and menopause through the speaking that I do, through talking to people, through my community. I often hear that when people will say, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, I'm an educator and I'm a researcher around menopause. And they're like, I'm so past that. And then I'm like, you're not past it, because once you're in menopause, you're always in menopause. So now more than ever, you're actually smack in menopause for the rest of your life. And given that most women will live in menopause between a third and a half of their life, we're never past it. We're always in it. So I feel like when we say we're way past it, it's dismissing important things like taking care of our nutrition, looking at our lifestyle habits, our exercise routines. How are we managing our stress? What supplements are we taking? To me, it is more important now than ever that we really look at this, because we're more prone to certain issues like heart disease, dementia, and osteoporosis. So this is where we really need to buckle down and be like, okay, what should I be eating? How should I be eating? Of course, it comes down to that 80-20 rule. Do what works for you. I'm not going to tell you you should or shouldn't. I'm going to give you those foundational kind of pillars. And then from there, you take what works for you. But if you're not feeling well, you might want to go in a little bit more, right? And if you're perfectly great, and you'll be like, maybe you'll come out a little bit less, but it's up to you how you want to look at it.
What do you think about bioidentical hormones?
So I always say hormones are out of my lane. I leave that to people who are experts in that. So I don't talk about hormones publicly. I've tried it. I have my own opinions, but it's not something that I talk about because I'm not an expert in it. I only talk about things that I'm an expert in.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Do you feel, so you've tried it, do you feel that you were able to get the results that you were happy with without it, and that's kind of why you tried it, and I'm guessing aren't currently taking or didn't take for very long?
Well, my story is it's unique to me because I really believe we all have our own unique genetic, makeup, right? So what worked for me may not work for you and vice versa. I am taking DHEA, which I really like, and DHEA converts to estrogen and testosterone in the body. So right now I'm working with that, and so it is a hormone, so I like that. I'm taking that, but everybody is really different. So I don't, it's just not something that I talk about, because it's not, I don't like to talk about things that I don't feel like I'm an expert in, and I haven't studied them the way I study nutrition, lifestyle, and supplements. So I just stay in my lane.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS 60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes, send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code that'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
And then DHEA, I think there are some that are lotions that you put on, and others, and does it come in pill form? Like, what is that?
I'm taking an oral DHEA that I find works really well for me. Yeah.
Excellent. So I saw a short that you did with your husband, and I think this number was higher. Is you're 25 years married with your husband? Is that right? Like I am.
We just celebrated 25 years.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And it was pretty funny because he was like celebrating 25 years. Well, in this case, 23 years with a woman in menopause, and he kind of grabs a little vodka and drinks the whole bottle. What advice would you give to men who are involved with women who are going through perimenopause? Because I can share that there are some challenges.
I think communication is the number one thing. I mean, so a lot of women, so here's the thing, and why, again, I'm going to say this a million times, I'm so passionate about what I do, because a lot of women don't know they're in perimenopause and their moods are changing, they're raging, right? They're not themselves, they're not interested in sex anymore, like their bodies are changing, they're hot all the time. Like it's just, there are so many symptoms, like I said, those 103. So a lot of the times women are going through it and they don't realize they're going through it. So anyone over the age of 35, perimenopause can start as early as 35. And that's something that's important to understand. So for men who are listening, or partners of women who are over the age of 35, and you're like, something's happening to my wife or my girlfriend or whatever it is, or my mom or my sister or whatever, my friend, what could possibly be happening? I would say, bring up the topic or the possibility that maybe she's going through perimenopause and that she should maybe look into things. Now, if you know that your wife is in perimenopause or menopause, have the open communication and dialogue. I mean, in my house, I am extremely open about it. My kids know about it. My husband knows about it. Is it perfect because everyone knows about it? Of course not. Do I get in moods and I total bitch sometimes? Absolutely. But at least the conversation and the dialogue is there. And a lot of times too, so this is how I'm, if you ask my kids, you'll be like, what's your mother's number one thing that she always says that, as a life lesson? I'm like, take responsibility for your actions. So even, if you do, and you're yelling at somebody or you go off the rails and you feel bad about it after, then apologize, say you're sorry. This is for the women themselves, right? Like, this is where we become, we're adults and we have these conversations. And if you feel you've done something that was inappropriate, you had an inappropriate reaction, take responsibility for it and say, listen, I don't know what's happening with my body. I don't know why I'm going off the rails, and let's have a conversation. If you need to speak to someone, seek a therapist, write in a journal, whatever it is you need to do. But that communication is so important between you and your partner, because without it, that's where things start to fester, resentment starts to come in, and when things aren't said, then assumptions are made. And I feel like, to me, that would be the most important thing to have with your partner.
Yeah, I think you're right. Lots of communication. We're not perfect, right? And by coming back
Nobody
and
is.
apologizing to your children, I
Yeah.
think you teach them, hey, you're not going to be perfect as well. I've got 14-year-old twins, so I'm having that conversation every now and then. In terms of my reactions, let's talk a little bit about your research. So you said this is the fourth paper, right? So you were already published, and now you've added another.
No, we had 4 published at the same time.
Oh, at the same time. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Talk a little bit about, like, what's your favorite of your 4 papers? Is it like choosing your favorite child? But
Yeah,
what's your
they're all
favorite?
amazing. Yeah, exactly. They're all amazing. So I'd say, obviously the signs and symptoms that we now know, there's 103 are amazing. My sleep survey was amazing. Our anxiety survey is amazing, which I mentioned all 3. The one we didn't talk about, which I also think is incredible, is our doctor's visit survey. So this is a survey. We had 1,050 women at the time. There's now, I think, over 1,300 responses. All of our surveys, by the way, are ongoing. So anybody could go to our website, which is wearemorphus.com. It's MORPHUS. So hopefully you'll put a link below. And if you go to the research tab at the top, there's 11 surveys right now. You could go fill them out. They are ongoing. Currently, so when I published the research for our signs and symptoms survey, it was based on 2,239 people, 2,239 people. We now have over 5,000 responses. Wow. So it's incredible. So they're ongoing. We're going to continue to update the data and continue to look at how this evolves as more women fill them out. So our doctor's visit survey is incredible. We looked at how doctors and healthcare providers are responding to women and how many times women have to go seek help from their doctors before a connection is made between how they're feeling and it being perimenopause and menopause. And this was based, like I said, on 1,050 women at the time. And we found out that 89%, so almost 90% of women are talking to their doctors about their symptoms. But what's happening is that it is taking anywhere between 2 and 5+ times for women to actually get answers. So 40% of the women are going to their doctors 2 to 3 times. 18% are going 3 to 4 times. 3 to 4 times. And 17%, no, 2 to 3 times is 40%, 4 to 5 times is 17%, and is 18%, and then 5 or more times is 17%. So that's a lot of times before the connection is made between, you're not feeling like yourself. You're going to find answers from different doctors. You're not getting the answers you're looking for. And we found that 75% of the women are bringing up the topic with their doctors. Only 10% of the doctors, though, were bringing up the topic with their patients. And 15% of them aren't bringing it up at all. So there's so much work that needs to be done around this in order for doctors and healthcare providers to have this conversation with their patients, because women are suffering. They don't know what's happening with their bodies. The connection isn't being made. There's health anxiety. Partners can have, issues with your partners. If low libido, I think, is the number 6 most common symptom, but yet women are being dismissed and being like, it's a natural part of life. It's a natural part of aging. Use lubrication. Like, it's just, if these conversations were had, because women, maybe they're dry in that area and it's hurting them. Well, maybe they can discuss things like topical estrogen, or maybe there's moisturizer or like there's different ways to talk about it. Yes, lubrication is a good answer, but it shouldn't be the number one thing that you're recommending without understanding what phase of life that woman is in.
So I've got 2 things kind of rolling through my head, which is, one is, if you have this reduced libido, and you said that's the number 6 symptom, weight gain, where does that sit in terms of number symptom? So,
It's not in the top 10. Weight gain is number like it's under 11, 12 or 13. It's lower down on the list, which is interesting. So it's not so much weight gain, it's changes in body composition, in body shape, and then slower metabolism. So that's where that fits in. So it's in the top 20, it's in the top 15, it's just not in the top 10. And the number 10 most common symptom is hot flashes, actually.
yeah, okay.
That's according to our 5,000 responses, by the way. That's according
5,000.
to the 5,000. Yeah.
That
Libido was number 10 on the 2239, and hot flashes took it kind of moved down once we had more responses, which is why I love watching the research evolve.
Well, and this could actually evolve from generation to generation because they might be focused on different things and it might be more top of mind. Like I'm more concerned about weight gain than I am about libido, depending on what society is telling them they should be concerned about, as we go through different generations. Is there... I have to imagine there's no easy. It'd be nice to have like some sort of estrogen test and go like, oh, you're in perimenopause, but that's actually fluctuating up and down. And maybe if we had some sort of baseline through your 20s, and then you could maybe see that, and you had an Aura ring focused on estrogen, it might be easier to identify. Is there any sort of thing like that, or are we just accumulating symptoms and going, hey, this is probably perimenopause?
So right now, there is no definitive test that determines if you're in perimenopause. There are some tests out there that you could do, like urine tests that you could do that can be predictive of whether or not you are possibly in perimenopause. Most doctors or healthcare practitioners will ask you how old you are, what your symptoms are, when your mother went through it, because that family history can play a role in it. So all of those can help to determine. But once you go into menopause, there is a blood test that can determine if your hormones are in the menopausal ranges. And you haven't had your period for a year.
Oh, okay. So well, there's the big clue, right? That means you've hit menopause, but to understand perimenopause is really tough one, right? Are they looking at just overall hormone levels, or are they looking like maybe at some ratios of some key hormones?
Well, ratios like estrogen, because again, there's different phases of perimenopause, right? So in that roller coaster phase is when your estrogen can go up to like 3 times its regular amount, right? And then your progesterone's falling. So that ratio between the progesterone falling and your estrogen being high, like they can look at that, but a lot of them won't. A lot of them, it'll end up, if you go get your blood test and your estrogen is in the proper range, your doctor will say you're not in perimenopause because your estrogen's in the proper range. But we know it fluctuates, especially in that roller coaster phase. So it's a very hard way to determine whether or not you're in perimenopause. Now, there are certain things like you may look at like urine testing, like I mentioned, but there's other types of urine tests too that will look at patterns. But A, that's expensive. B, that takes time. And most people aren't going to do that.
Yeah. You almost need some sort of Aura ring that's keeping track of hormones over a long
that would
time
be amazing.
basis. And then you could do it. I wonder if temperature could, right? Because temperature can identify where you are in your cycle often. So I wonder, that would be interesting.
Possibly. Again, these are out of my lane. I'm not a doctor or an expert in this, but that would be great. If what I'd also love is a ring or something that can look at our insulin levels. That would be fantastic. So.
Have you played around with a continuous glucose monitor?
Oh yeah. Oh yes, definitely.
Just a little sidebar here. What was maybe something that you consumed that surprised you, either not spiking or spiking more than you would have expected, or anything?
So everyone, and I see so many people online showing their like CGM, like their results and how it spikes this a bit. We're all so different. So like to your point, like what affects my blood sugar may not affect yours and vice versa. Also, what's the state of your gut health? Like there's so much at play with it. So for me, things that really spike my blood sugar would be things like watermelon. And you'll hear from people saying, eat watermelon, it won't spike your blood sugar. Like to me, it's off the charts, as is sweet potato, off the charts for me. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's like, and now I'm not saying these aren't healthy foods. I'm just saying for me in particular. Now, what comes into play? Genetics play a huge role in this, which I feel like isn't discussed as much, right? So for me, I don't do as well on carbohydrates as some other people might. Like my husband, no problem, can do amazing on them. So genetics play a massive role in terms of how we do with it. Again, it's a role, but it's not everything, right?
Yeah.
So everybody's super different. And also, what stage of your life are you in? Like I'm in menopause. For me, it's just now, if I have it smaller amounts, it's not as bad. But if I have like a whole sweet potato, it's going to like spike it through the roof. So the amounts you're having, what you're having, everybody is super different.
All right. So you talked about a roller coaster phase, and you said you kind of believe that there are three phases of perimenopause. Apparently, officially, there's two. Talk about those and your third.
Yeah, again, like, so really quickly, because hormones are not my area of expertise, but the first phase is really when your progesterone's falling, your estrogen is stable. The second one we talked about which is the roller coaster phase. And then the third one is when all your hormones are kind of going lower into that menopausal range.
Okay, so the first phase is really just progesterone dropping. Your estrogen may be fine or even spiking. I think you kind of
Yeah,
alluded
your
to.
estrogen stays in that normal range.
That's really fascinating that there's kind of three phases of that perimenopause. Hopefully, we'll come out with some sort of process to identify what phase you're in. How can women take control of their health in menopause symptoms,
Menopause
not
symptoms.
systems?
I would think like the three pillars that we kind of talked about briefly is nutrition, lifestyle, so managing stress and exercise, but also I'm a big advocate for taking supplements, and which is why I launched the supplement line. So for me, I don't want you to just take anything and everything out there. So don't just listen to an influencer who's going to say, you should take. No. You want to take supplements, ingredients in particular that are specific for women in perimenopause and menopause. I used to be the person that took everything and anything. No longer. Now I'm taking things that I know that there's research on them and that they are safe for us in this phase of life. So for me, we launched a line of supplements called Morphus supplements. And I did the research and we looked at what do we need in this phase of life and how do they affect us? So things like magnesium, fish oil, fiber, like specifically soluble fiber, prebiotic soluble fiber. These are things that our body needs as we go into perimenopause and menopause. There's amazing research, and most of us are deficient in magnesium. And no, it's not a good indication of taking your magnesium in your blood, because that won't really give you a good indication if you're deficient in magnesium. So magnesium, probably 70 to 80% of us need more. But as we go into menopause and we're more stressed, when we're stressed, we deplete magnesium. When magnesium is depleted, we're more stressed. So taking a magnesium supplement, absolutely getting everything from food. I'm just going to say it up front. It is the foundation. Everything you want to get is from food. However, our food is depleted of minerals, which we know about. The World Health Organization came out and said it. We know that it's depleted of minerals. We know that we're not absorbing our food as well. And we also know many of us are eating less as we get into perimenopause and menopause, or as we're aging. So taking a magnesium supplement is excellent for brain health. It helps with over 600 different functions in the body. And we know specifically in menopause, it can stave off dementia or memory loss. So huge reasons for it, right? It's also incredible for sleep. Our magnesium is a bisglycinate. Why is that important? Because it's attached to the amino acid glycine, which helps us to relax. So take 2 or 3 capsules of our mag before bed with our Sleep Us. You are getting so much incredible deep sleep and REM sleep, by the way, and it improves your overall quality of sleep. I formulated Sleep Us myself and I took it as a combination from several different products and put it into one. It's magic. And when you take both of them together, and I have, I see you're also wearing your rings. I play around with different wearables, and the amount of deep sleep that I'm getting since taking the combination of Sleep Us and magnesium is incredible. So for me, like we talked about before, that's sleep. And to your point, number one thing that we need to be looking at, of course, a digestion as well, but sleep is critical for us.
I haven't looked into it, and if there is no symbiotic relationship between sleep and gut health, I would be extremely surprised. I haven't kind of dug into that, but I imagine that they're correlated. I actually was just doing a webinar yesterday on mitochondria. Sleep and mitochondrial health are absolutely correlated. It wouldn't surprise me if sleep and your gut health is correlated as well. So your goal is to teach women how to thrive during perimenopause and menopause. We've covered a lot of really fascinating stuff here. Is there anything you'd like to add? Is there anything that maybe we didn't cover? Maybe I didn't get to ask you that you feel like, hey, this is really kind of foundational, or maybe like out of the blue, like something that people aren't thinking about regularly and maybe should be, coming more to the top of their mind?
I would say mindset for sure. So we didn't touch upon mindset. So there was really interesting research, and it showed that how we view menopause will actually impact our experience with it. And it showed that people who looked at menopause as a negative actually had more symptoms. So I feel like mindset is an important part that we need to talk about because it shapes so much for us. But also I get when you're going through perimenopause, it's very hard to see the light at the end of that, kind of the end of the tunnel, and see through the fog and all of that because you're in it, right? I was there, so I understand it. But I want you to understand that it does get better. This too shall pass. And there are solutions. You don't have to suffer. So my lane, nutrition, lifestyle, and supplements, but there's also the option of hormones if that's something you choose to do. And by the way, everything can be used in conjunction together. So it's not to say if you're taking hormones that you shouldn't look at your nutrition, lifestyle, and supplements. Everything can be taken together if you choose to go that hormone route. So I look at it, our bodies as a whole. Like just the way you want to eat whole foods, our body is a whole being, and we got to look at our mental, our physical, and our spiritual. And doing the work is important too. For a lot of us, as we go into perimenopause and menopause and we're aging, a lot of trauma can come up, right? So my mom is an expert on trauma, and she did a lot of videos on my page about it as well. So things can start to come up for us. So doing the work is important because that could help us get through this stage also and thrive.
Yeah, I think mindset. There's another thing related to stress that says if you think about a stress, whether it's a work stress, a family stress, or whatever, as being something that you hate and there's no value in it, it's actually more stressful. You get higher cortisol spikes or whatever. If you think of a stress as something that's going to challenge you, that you're going to develop skill sets working through it, you actually experience less stress and you come out on the other side in a better place. And the reality is all stresses will leave us in a better place. That's at least what I believe.
There's a great TED talk on stress and how you perceive stress and then how your body deals with it. So yes, to your point, sorry to interrupt you.
Well, yeah. And the symptoms of perimenopause and menopause are a stressor, right? Like nothing on that list comes without stress or isn't a stress. And so your mindset about that is really important. And that's actually something that came out of, I did a longevity summit, interviewed 55 experts in longevity. And one of the things that came up was mindset and how important mindset was. Because if you're trying to do the right things, right, key things are nutrition, how you manage stress and exercise. If you don't have the mindset to change your nutrition, it's not going to happen. If you don't have the mindset to focus on whether it's meditation or whatever the thing is that helps you manage stress better, it's not going to improve. Same with exercise. Exactly. You've got to have the mindset to be able to make those changes. I think that's pretty powerful. All right. So I do have some wrap up questions. I feel like I'm going to give a ChatGPT prompt here because I so respect that you really didn't want to dive into hormone replacement because that's not your area of expertise. These are kind of longevity questions, and I understand they're not your area of expertise. I want you to act like a longevity expert.
Okay.
And
I'll put my longevity cap on. Okay.
Exactly. And so these answers, we will not hold these against you at any point in the future. Do you have a target age that you would like to live to?
Yeah, I always have that number 103 in my mind. So minimum 103.
Is that related to your symptoms, or did you stop at your symptom count?
I don't know. That's hilarious. No, I don't know. I've always had that number way before those symptoms came in. So no, unrelated.
You were pushing. There's got to be one more. It's got to match the age. It's funny how things like that work out. And then here's your kind of longevity thinking up. How long do you think humans can live?
I mean, I don't know if I have an actual number, but I do think with all the new technology and everything that's helping people live longer, that I think it's possible that more of us will live longer. And I to a later age. I interviewed somebody on my podcast, and he's a longevity expert, and he was saying, he was fascinating, and he was talking about how genetics, they call it like the super agers, how their genetics play a massive role. It was Dr. Thomas Pearls. I don't know if you ever interviewed him, but he's really, the guy, he runs the Longevity Institute in Boston, and it's fascinating information and the research that they've done. And he said that genetics play a big role. And he was saying that nutrition and lifestyle play a role to live into your 90s. But like once you get to and your early hundreds, but once you get to like the 105 plus or somewhere around there, that's where your genetics kick in. So, but I think with all the new technology and information and everything that we have and know now, it's only going to get better. And AI and all of these things, I think that we're going to end up living longer, which is really cool.
So to lean on him and so maybe 103 is about where you think humans will start to fall off rapidly.
That's what I mean. That's according to what he was saying in terms of what we can control and can control. But again, listen to my podcast. It's Dr. Thomas Pearls and it is Menopause Reimagined is my podcast. I just forget I'm trying to remember what episode it was. I don't remember the episode, but it's Menopause Reimagined, Thomas Pearls.
Very cool. All right. What are 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets? Let's call them shortcuts because everybody likes shortcuts to longevity and a long health span that you can share.
I would say definitely the nutrition and lifestyle piece and the supplements piece, and then the mindset. I would say all of those play a massive role in terms of helping us getting there. And in that is the exercise, and in that is the managing stress. It kind of encompasses everything we talked about today.
Okay, very cool. And maybe 1 or 2 things that you think people get absolutely wrong regarding longevity and a long health span.
So, I mean, I don't know if I specifically have 1 or 2 things that in particular that I want to hone in on, but I think my message here is more that there's a lot of information out there, and there's a lot of information of people who say you should do this and you should do that, and here's what you should and here's what you shouldn't. But at the end of the day, you need to listen to your body and what works for you. So just because someone might say to you, you have to follow this type of diet, but that diet doesn't do well for you, well, that's not going to help you because it doesn't do well for you. So you need to listen to your body. And, I gave you an example before we started recording that I posted something about seed oils recently on my social media. And it was my personal experience with seed oils. I've interviewed Dr. Kate Shanahan 4 times on my podcast. She is brilliant. She's the one who put seed oils on the map. Now, there is research for and there's research against it. Dr. Shanahan's research is very much about why they're not that great and how they can lead to oxidative stress, which could lead to inflammation in our body. I shared a story of how it leads to inflammation in my body. My body doesn't like it, especially in large amounts. But there was somebody who was saying on my Instagram page and showing all the studies of how it's completely safe and how it's not, it's not inflammatory. So I am here to say that you need to listen to your body and listen to yourself. And even though you're always going to find research that's pro and against, but you can't just go by what the research says. You have to go by what your body says. Definitely look at the research. But if the research says, for example, that it doesn't cause inflammation, but you're like, this causes inflammation, you have to go with what works for you and what your body is telling you. So my advice would be is you're the captain of your own ship. Listen to yourself. Listen to your body. Don't listen. You definitely take into account what others are saying, what the research says. Look at everything. Look at all possible scenarios. And then at the end of the day, you make the decision what's best for your body.
I think that's a great answer to a question you thought we might not want to ask in this podcast. So I think great job there.
Thank you.
Andrea, how can people contact you?
Yeah. So my website is wearemorphus.com, WEAREMORPHUS. So metamorphosis, morph us as a community. That's how we came up with our name. We made it up. And then I'm on TikTok at Andrea Donsky. And I'm also on Instagram at Andrea Donsky and at We Are Morphus, and pretty much anywhere. We're on X, we're on Pinterest, we're on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn at Andrea Donsky. So anywhere you're on social.
Is anyone more active than the other, or they can just connect with you on their favorite platform?
I would say, I would say I'm most active on TikTok and Instagram.
Okay, excellent. And what in the near future are you excited about?
Oh, so sorry. Also LinkedIn. I do get messages on LinkedIn. I have to become more active on it. Sorry, what did you ask me? I apologize.
What in the near future are you excited about?
Just general, in general, or through my company, or
both?
Anything, both. Well, in general, I'm very excited that, from a personal standpoint, I'm an assistant coach for my daughter's basketball team. So I'm very excited that they're going to be playing high level basketball and having several games. So that excites me. I love that. And that's like balance time. I'm very excited about my book that I'm writing that will be published in 2026 on menopause. So I've been very busy writing my book. So many things. I'm so grateful for so many things in my life. My, things that are coming up, our company Morphus is building, and my, relationship with my family, my husband, my kids, like so many things that are coming up that I just thank the universe, and I thank, my angels all the time. And I know that might sound funny, but I do. I'm very grateful for everything that I have and that I've had to date and have accomplished to date. So.
Yeah, very, very awesome. All right, so you can find her at wearemorphus.com, and that's wearemorphus.com. And then it's on TikTok, it's Andrea Donsky, that's Andrea. I think that's right. Donsky, Donsky. And you can find her on TikTok and LinkedIn and Instagram. And there's great content out there with hundreds of thousands of followers and millions of views. Andrea, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Chris.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.